Hey, another week. Welcome to the program. I'm Maupe Yusuf.
It's June 19 here in Lagos, Nigeria. I don't know what time it is on your end. I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome. Perhaps just to begin, Chamberlain, I know that we're not talking about this really. For those who are not aware, a completely different traffic agenda has been set for those around Berger, inward or outward Lagos, just so you are aware. Okay, so Chamberlain, what were we talking about again?
Well, yeah, I mean, you'll get to read that advisory to a lot of people because many may not have been used to that route which the FRSC has put about. We'll just come to that in a moment. But in the meantime, remember Senator Adamu Bokachua? Yeah, it may ring a bell lately because only recently, as a matter of fact, yesterday, is all over the news again. And this time, he's recanting, refuting allegations that he ever interfered with his wife's, that's former chief judge, in terms of while she was carrying out her duties. Well, and I know that many, in fact, his narrative is that the president of the Senate did not let him finish. So if he had let him finish, maybe you and I might have gotten a different narrative in terms of what happened. Even though, yes, it was on the floor of the House while he was giving during the valedictory session of the 9th Assembly last week. He says it was taken out of context and linked his wife's work as a judge to the Congress. Now, perhaps, okay, maybe what we're going to do, because he granted an interview saying all of this latest perspective. So we'll just listen to this again, just so you could see certain things for yourself.
This kind of insinuation will...
Mr. President, at my age, I don't think I will lobby anybody under the sun. I would do the right thing, and I always do the right thing, and sincerely and honestly too. So, I know, I look at faces in this chamber whom have come to me and sought for my help when my wife was the president of the Court of Appeal. And I'm sure I'm... Distinguished Senator Adam Ahmed Bulkacho, I think I will advise that you just round up and take your seat. Name any names. We know ourselves. No, but this kind of insinuation will mean that there was favor, there was this, and the rest of it. I don't think it's a good idea. Well, Mr. Chairman, I must say that, okay, to round up, since that's what you want me to do, I will do that. And I must thank particularly my wife, whose freedom and independence I encroached upon while she was in office. And she has been very tolerant and accepted my encroachment and extended her help to my colleagues. Distinguished, please, I don't think this is a good idea, go in this direction. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea, please.
So there you go. He says he was interrupted and there are different kinds of help that he might have been referring to. Yes, he's in politics and she's in law. And as such, that interruption gave room for insinuations. Yeah, I mean, one has to grin about some of these things because I just wonder. People can see for themselves.
It would be very interesting to read the full length of his... Maybe he could expatiate on, you know, what parts, because I have noted down a few things here. He talked about his colleagues who sought for my help when my wife was president of the Court of Appeal. They didn't seek for his help at any other time. He wasn't talking about, I mean, she's since left office. Yes, she's since left office in the year 2020. That's when her tenure elapsed. It's been 3 years, at least, since she was president of the Court of Appeal. He didn't thank her in generality. He wasn't saying, oh, my wife, thank you for for the sleepless nights, or, you know, for hosting my friends countless numbers of times in spite of your very busy schedule as president. That's not what he said. He said, you know, his colleagues who sought for his help when his wife was president of the Court of Appeal. Then when he was interrupted, and he said, oh, okay, since you want me to round up, I mean, everybody could hear, why do I have to interpret it? But just in case we need an interpreter, let me serve as well this morning, please. He says, I have to thank my wife, whose freedom and independence I encroached upon. And she extended her help to my colleagues. Sir, there are only so many interpretations. There are only so many meanings that could be given. And then the Senate president, of course, who had the same, if indeed, you know, the Senate president was misinterpreting what he was saying.
He should have clarified.
Then he should have clarified. At that point, he should have understood the impressions he was given and, you know, say, Mr. Senate President, I'm sorry, that's not what I'm not referring to her work as president of the Court of Appeal. He could have quickly clarified, because on two different occasions, the Senate President read what every other Nigerian would have read into that and, you know, try to call him to order. But he didn't. As someone said, he was a man who would not be helped.
Because, I mean, after that first interruption, you'd have thought, wait a minute, what did you think I was going to say, Mr. Senate President?
Exactly.
But he continued in that trajectory.
In that trajectory.
They sought his help. And we know the Senate President was in a certain precarious legal situation at the time concerning his return to the Senate. And eventually, who knows?
But precarious, but the Senate president didn't happen until last year. The wife of Senator Bolkachua has ceased to be president of the Court of Appeal in 2020. So her tenure elapsed at least 3 years ago. You're talking about matters that perhaps came from the 2019 elections up until 2020, when she sat as president of the Court of Appeal. So that's what lawyers are now saying. We need to go and investigate if, you know, they were untoward things. You've heard Mr. Agbakuba SAN come out to say, look, we presented our facts before this woman's court, and, you know, we did not win, and we're now thinking that as a result of and it was a matter that concerned the Senate. We're now thinking that it's because of, you know, this sort of encroachment, that those kinds of matters now need to be investigated by the NJC. But these are matters that perhaps came from the 2019 elections, not recent matters. Nonetheless, whether they're recent or these kinds of insinuations, you know, do not bode well for the Nigerian judiciary. There is already a crisis of, don't forget, there was a time when Supreme Court justices wrote a very unsavory letter to the Chief Justice of Nigeria. That was something that was unheard of before, and as a result of that, the Chief Justice had to resign his position, and another Chief Justice was elected. So the Nigerian judiciary has been through a lot in recent times, and this sort of statement certainly do not help the image any further. So I'm hoping, I do not know whether the clarification which he offered, you know, will make sense. Another angle, though, is interesting, because people have said, oh, not only should he be investigated, his wife should not be investigated. There's now the question as to whether or not he can be investigated, because according to them, when you have this sort of, when you say this sort of thing on the floor
of immunity or what?
Yes, you are covered by some immunity. You cannot be prosecuted for what you have said on the floor of the Senate. Now, I do not know how that's going to play out. If indeed that is something that, if indeed lawyers would like to test it in court, it will be certainly worth testing. But that doesn't mean that the person whom he mentioned cannot be investigated. That person is not covered by any immunity. Well,
if that immunity was there, you would have thought the Senate President would allow them go on, finish up. After all, you have immunity for whatever you're going to say.
Yeah,
but that didn't happen.
It's all the other impressions. I mean, he can say anything he wants to say. It's the impressions that he gives, I mean, about how some of them got to be there in the very first instance.
So because we have spoken to several people after that, and they just tell you, look, this has confirmed the fears or the impressions that we had all along. And so they also took it further, saying, look, you know, when certain persons leave offices, top offices in the country, they don't lose their influence immediately. So it could still be there a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line. That's why when some judgments are handed down, people wonder, they keep asking, just seems to fly in the face of not even logic or reason, let alone legal precedents, and they just wonder. So all of these things are just all connected. But now that this is out there, look, this just appears as though he's setting the grounds for other persons who may want to intervene and use that as an excuse to get them off the hook. This just appears as though that is what is about to play out here. And this may just be the end of it. But let's not also forget, the president of the NBA also spoke about this matter, asking that prosecutions immediately should happen. He said he was upset and disgusted at what has transpired. And there you go. Those are part of the statement that he issued at that time, saying, look, something needs to be done about all of this, because these are all very senior, erudite legal minds. They, even if laymen don't understand what transpired, are you telling me too that the NBA too have been misled by his statement or the interference not once or twice where he had opportunity to clarify? Okay, Senator Bokachowa, we hear you.
Well, you know, Chamberlain, very interesting, conversation we've had this morning. And Mark, where you used the word prosecuted. And in that statement as well, you see that the president of the NBA says, after interrogation, proceed to execution, to prosecution. I guess that suggests that in the event that investigation provides results that suggest some culpability of sorts. Most certainly. But, interestingly, I think even before that statement was made, the former president of the Court of Appeal made a statement herself. She says, and I quote, "My husband is a politician, but politics is a no-go area in the House. Even my children are aware of that. No politician is invited to the House. My husband can pursue whatever he wants to pursue as a politician, but we hardly discuss politics in the House. All these help to guard against any influence from any politician." And Senator Bokachowa, in his rebuttal, as you called it, Chamberlain, also said that these things are not discussed in the House. So where is it that the colleagues ask for help? Is it within the confines of the National Assembly? I think this also lays a responsibility on people who have the positions of authority, positions of influence, not just in what you do, but in what you say as well. Now that the NBA is speaking, in the event that the IGP does not do anything about it, or the ICPC does not do anything about it, what happens? If he cannot be prosecuted for what he said, Malpoy, as you have, helped us to understand, can he be investigated? Can he be interrogated? Okay, no, not interrogated. Can he be investigated? And can those judgments again be revisited? That, some of these judgments that are right now being questioned, unfortunately. A lot to say about this, but hey, I wish we had some lawyer here to give us some perspectives, guys.
Community guys, look, even governors, when they're in positions, we've heard it time and again, they can be investigated. Then when you're out of the office, then you're prosecuted. What makes it any different from this? Anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts, everybody out there. Tell us what you think of what is going on at the moment. So while you're at that, let's jump in and take you through some of the dailies this morning. Let's start with New Telegraph. Oh, look at that. Lawyers, you were asking for one, Ayo. Well, they're showing up in the dailies. Lawyers push for Bokachowa's prosecution. Say his confession undermines judiciary's integrity. There you go. Yeah, this is it. That's what you see right here. Front page. New Telegraph.
So why, somebody might have immunity for saying certain things on the floor, it doesn't mean that what they have said cannot be investigated. I don't think that's what it means. I don't think that's how immunity should work. I think what it should do is that it should give you freedom to be able to say certain things on the floor of the National Assembly without fear of recrimination. But by that I mean, if you're assuming you were to say something against a public institution, for instance, that you should not be held liable for that. Or if you're to reveal something that was true, or something like that. It doesn't mean then that what you have said cannot be investigated. I don't think that's not what immunity does.
In the first place, I don't even understand the concept and the principle of them seeking immunity on the floor of the House concerning what they say. They are elected, they are senators, for goodness sakes, not just regular Nigerians. So what else are they supposed to do on the floor of the House? So if such persons are afraid of saying certain things against institutions, you can then imagine what kind of democracy we have. Does that then mean that even they are hamstrung, their hands are tied, or what have they been? It suggests that they've been previously hounded by certain things that might have been said on the floor of the House, and so they're seeking this one to hide under, well, if that
privileges.
And then wonders, they say, just never cease. If this is not a clear example,
parliamentary privileges.
I just wonder, because I thought once you're elected on the floor of the House, you have the mandate of your people to go in there, represent them in the interest of this country, and you can go in there and do your job no matter whose ox is God. But who knows? What do I know? I'm not a lawmaker. But it doesn't mean that we're not part of those who elect them. So if we then we've got a right. After all, power is with the people. All right, look at what's at the bottom strip here. CP's deployment. PSC condemns Southeast, Northeast marginalization to redress lopsided postings. Demands female CPs in at least 3 state commands. So, there you go. This study might interest you guys, though. Study says spending 1.5 hours daily in outdoor lights reduces depression risk. That is New Telegraph today.
Yeah, certainly. Spend some time in the sun. It's one of the reasons why we celebrate the sun on this program. Sunrise Daily, it's called. It certainly should cheer you up a bit. Take a look at The Guardian this morning and what they have for you. Households under pressure as new electricity tariff due July 1st.
Oh, dear.
I saw that song. Under pressure, we were under pressure. Who sang that song? Do you know?
Yeah, but
Raskimono.
something needs to be done about this electricity tariff. Look, if you keep, because that law is still there, and they still tell you, look, this thing will keep going up every now and then. And then if we keep getting this kind of service, this epileptic power supply that we keep getting, look, at some point, people will, if they've not had it more than up to here, so well, it's one of the areas we're looking to see some major changes, because if infrastructure hasn't developed and these charges, they will always tell you about appropriate pricing, whatever that means. But look, there has to be appropriate supply as well, please.
Indeed, appropriate supply. I think that's extremely key. They also have for you a breakdown. Available grid electricity, they're looking at 3,057.7 megawatts from 17 power plants. MITO price setting, they're showing you what it's been over the years. From 2015 to 2020, it was 25 naira. At 2020, it went up a steep from 25 naira to 60 naira. 2020 to 2022, we saw a 4 naira increase, and now it looks like we might be seeing a 3 naira increase per kilowatt hour. So there's also that FX rate used in tariff setting. You might want to see details just right there. But yes, I mean, households having to deal with increased price of fuel and then increased cost of electricity. Indeed, the pressure is on. And take a look at all the stories they have here. Petrol subsidy. Government, Labour resume negotiation on implementation framework. The details are on page 6 of the paper. Fuss of a bill to regulate Christian preaching. Okay. Very interesting to see. Regulate Christian. How can you? I don't know. But with the proliferation of churches and pastors these days, and even I don't know. You might want to take a look at page 4. I think the only state that attempted that was Kaduna State, and we saw just how bad the pushback was. So you might want to see what that story is about on page 4 of the paper. Amid subsidy removal pains, experts advocate long-term benefits, so that's also there as well. And spare a thought for people who are living with sickle cell. Professionals deplore high cost of treatment as World Sickle Cell Day holds. It's a page 3 read. Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspapers. Flip
to the Vanguard newspaper. It seems, Maokwe, that whatever the supply is, the market is actually quite huge. But before I get there, let's look at the major story on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Cabinet infighting as APC camps pitch for ministerial jobs. Find the story on page 5. Lobbyists besiege Aso Rock. President may send list to Senate July 4. That's how many weeks away? Let the countdown begin. Special advisors may supervise ministers. Find the details again on the inside pages. Look at that on the front page major story. Manufacturers spend 144.5 billion naira on self-generated power in 1 year. 144.5 billion naira. And guess where that money is going straight to? Yes, you heard me. It's right there on the products that you buy. And guess who is paying? Yes, you. You are the one that's going to return all 144.5 billion naira to the manufacturers. The riders are also there. High energy costs push down output. Real costs on businesses suggest way forward. New Electricity Act will be beneficial, according to Mann and Nasima. Find the details on the inside pages. Still talking about electricity, right above the nameplate. Electricity, 58% of consumers without meter. Now, consider that in comparison with that story on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Then you wonder, why increase when you haven't even maximized half of the market that you have? The details of that you'll find on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Forex allow customers free access to domiciliary account funds. CBN orders banks. Find that also on page 8. A quick look at Mr. and Mrs. And Mr. is complaining. Yesterday was Father's Day. Not even a word of greetings from you. And Mrs. is asking, are you my father? That's the Vanguard newspaper this morning.
Come on. Okay. That was just mean. That was mean and sharp and cruel. Yeah. At least I didn't tell my husband that. I felt a little guilty that I didn't buy him a gift on behalf of the kids. But hey, come on.
Well, Mr. and Mrs. tell us what was the reaction after that. So I guess for those who may think that's the way to go, wait for the reaction. Leadership newspaper is the next one here. Lobby for appointments begins as FG mulls dissolution of boards. OSGF feigns. It says OSGF feigns ignorance. Party loyalists hope for political patronage. North got 289 slots. South 278 under Buhari. Exercise necessary to streamline Tinubu's vision. And so they're saying OSGF office must know something. So telling us you don't know means you're feigning ignorance. So, well, that's this is the big lead here today. And yes, you might have seen this yesterday as well. I was poisoned at PDP Secretariat in 2018, ascribed to Wike. And then some economic matters here. Nigeria needs $60 billion foreign reserves to stabilize Naira. According to experts. Well, we might ask a thing or two about that as we progress here today, but that will be for leadership today.
Indeed, because there has to be sufficient supply for the Naira to maintain some stability. And I think that what we've done with the floating, depending on where you stand, some people say floating, some people say devaluation of the Naira, is to ensure that, we get supply from would-be investors who should be bringing in the forex. But take a look at what Daily Trust has on the front page this morning. 4 days to go, over 15,000 Nigerian pilgrims yet to be airlifted. Nakon Ahon activate rescue flights. Tour operators intending pilgrims lament. Sultan declares June 28 Eid al-Kabir. So, yeah, this is the one I think we have the RAM. So let's get ready. Page 4 is where we will see details. But I don't know why we have to go through this every time as to, I mean, we know that people will go on pilgrimage every year. Shouldn't the arrangements get better? Why do we have to have 15,000 Nigerian pilgrims, yet to be airlifted? I think that state governments and tour operators and all the people involved should get their acts together. We can't keep seeing this almost on a yearly basis. You also have a number of other stories here. Homeowners cry out as Kano government marks houses for demolition.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
That's a demolition man now.
Demolition demolisher. Page 6. This governor will soon get a nickname if he hasn't gotten one already. People say it's a lot easier to tear down than to build. I hope he has very swift plans to build up. You can't just be tearing things down everywhere with no plans to build. So while he's building, I hope he has a very concrete plan to build. That's extremely important. Well, page 6 is where you'll find details. Homeowners are crying out because their houses have been marked for demolition. You also have a number of other stories. CBN lifts restriction on domiciliary accounts, allows $10,000 daily withdrawals. So if you have up to that in your DOM account, go ahead and withdraw it. Nigerian farmers have been victimized. Guess who's speaking? Former President Obasanjo. Oh, yes, you heard right. I'm sure he certainly knows what he's talking about, but I don't think he's him that he's referring to. It cannot be him. I don't think he's referring to
marginalization?
Anyone dares marginalize the former president, one like Obasanjo, you will receive a letter. That's what I can assure you. Oh, well, Tinubu's advisory council recommends sale of refineries, other assets, so you find details on page 24.
I want to see what kind of letter President Tinubu will receive.
Yes, because no president has been free of that, at least since the Jonathan time. I don't say Jonathanian time, but let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
And switch to the Nigerian News Direct very quickly. Of course, you know what that story may be about. Yes, that's it right there. Asari Dokubo allegation, reveal names of crude oil thieves, Nigerian Navy. Of course, you know where that is coming from. No black sheep will be spared, according to the Army. Discipline airing military officers, published list of operations, Sahara Energy co-founder declares. The details of that you'll find on page 21 of the paper this morning. A host of stories on the front page. Student loans, give grants instead of loans as ascribed to ASU. Why so? What does that mean? The details you find on the inside pages of the paper this morning. A quick switch to the Abuja Inquirer this morning, and what do you have on its front page? It is also, of course, about Abuja. That's it right there. Park and Pay, FCTA, AMAC infighting, stall commencement. What does that mean? The details you'll find on the inside pages. Disagreement over revenue collection sharing formula. Wow, about money. Interesting. FCTA licenses poised for court battle. FCTA licensees poised for court battle. AMAC to charge 100 naira per hour. Find the details of what that means on the inside pages. Right above the nameplate, that black strip. Nigeria, Morocco sign MOU with 4 countries on gas pipeline. The story is on page 15. The details of that, of course, you get there so you get better understanding. And with that, we come to an end of a look at the papers this morning, but certainly the beginning of the issues to be discussed today. Just stay with us.
of subsidy for petrol continues to generate dust, and the Nigeria Labour Congress has summoned this emergency meeting of its National Executive Council to deliberate on the matter.
See you out on the picketing front.
First, the president of the NLC, Mr. Joa Jairo, briefs the media.
The issue of subsidy has not been probed all these years, and for anybody to close that chapter is like covering fraud. The Nigerian Labour Congress has called the NEC members for us to interrogate some of these processes, to know who we are collecting the subsidy money.
The meeting goes into a closed-door session, and human rights lawyer Mr. Femi Falana takes the moment to address the media outside the hall.
NNPC Limited, a private company, was alleged to have fixed the prices of petroleum products or jacked up the price. It is clearly illegal. There's no provision for it under the law. So we hope that the government will have to go back to the drawing table and take the whole month, the month of June, to meet with relevant stakeholders to plan and look for alternative solutions to the problem. And there are alternative solutions. We must learn from what other countries are doing to address this, the dollarization of economy.
Nigerians have been paying through their nose for petrol and for transportation amidst other economic consequences since the pronouncement by President Bola Tinubu on May the 29th that the subsidy regime for petrol is gone. But the NLC National Executive Council has taken some major decisions, including not talking to any person without a portfolio. The president briefs the media.
The NLC decided that if by Wednesday next week that the NNPC refuses to revert itself for negotiation to continue, that the Nigerian Labour Congress and all its affiliates will withdraw their services and commence protests nationwide until this is complied with. The NLC NEC therefore directed all state councils and all industrial unions to commence mobilization from this moment to make sure that this action is enforced.
NLC has spoken, but will the government yield? Both parties are expected to meet on Sunday, June the 4th, 2023, and Nigerians are hoping that the dark days will be averted. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, yes, indeed, those two gentlemen join us this morning to shed light on some of these policies that you've seen, the possible implications on you, how it affects your business, basically. So they are here to break it down for us. They are those who should know what these policies will mean. Here in Abuja studio, we've got Jonathan Aremu, who is a professor of international economic relations, the former acting vice chancellor of Covenant University, and also former acting assistant director of research in the CBN. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today, sir.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain.
Well, first of all, people use the words interchangeably: floating of the naira, devaluation.
Yeah.
They say it means two different things, some people.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what does that mean?
Yeah, you are correct that the two are not the same thing. Devaluation is a policy statement. It's a policy to reduce the value of a domestic currency so as to realign it with what they think should be right. Whereas depreciation is allowing the market forces to determine what the value should be. So while the policy side can actually be realigned to the market, at times it may not be. And over time in Nigeria, you discover that the policy aspect of devaluation in Nigeria has not actually been in line with the market-determined rate. And that is actually where the confusion comes from. Depreciation is allowing the market forces. Devaluation is a policy of the government.
So what did we have this time out with the Naira?
What we are having now appears to be depreciation, allow the market forces to determine. But you see, again, one may need to question that, because should we have a double exchange rate in which one of it is about 750, another one official rate is 400 and something, and then there's a gap of over 300. Is that not too much? And then you now say that you allow the market forces, and then the market forces now say it's going to be 700 and something. Obviously, so there cannot be a sort of synchronization or handshake in that area.
So to the extent that we have those two windows, can we then say we have not?
Yes, you cannot say that the market is the one that is determining the thing now, because obviously the kind of shadow between the official and the market determined rate that will have been permitted before has not been allowed to be interplay, and then that is why we are having what we are having. So to me, I think as time goes on, everything will play out.
If what the unification?
There can be unification.
But what kind of possible impacts will it have either way?
Oh, obviously it's clear. The possible impact is clear to everybody. Why? Because number one, for the manufacturing sector and other business agents in Nigeria that have been having opportunity to have access to official rate, they can no longer have it. And therefore that will jack up the production cost, which to this time may not be in a good interest of the tradables within Nigeria and outside Nigeria to other African countries, now that we are entering African continental free trade area. So it may not be something that may be of something of interest, but if we allow the thing to go ahead, and then the final version is a total unification of these two bands, then obviously that problem will go, but it can take time.
Well, some people will say that yes, indeed, it might take a bit of time. But do you ever see a situation whereby the parallel market and the main market, the official market, will ever come together? Because people also still note that when they go abroad, the official rate, I mean, from where you get to buy from the BDCs, is usually slightly higher than the official rate. So do you think that will ever happen?
Thank you, madam. You see, the unification will never be 100%. You go to some countries, you discover that the official exchange rate is a little bit lower than the market. Why? Because the market cannot always wait for the official to determine their own. The market is on the spot. The official is through some processes. So that small gap is there. But what we are saying in Nigeria is that our own gap was too much and allowed for rent seeking. For God's sake, people that have access to official exchange rate can just continue buy dollar and sell in the market. And that's what the former governor of CBN was saying, that the cheapest way to be able to make money is just to have access to it officially and then sell in the black market, which to me it has been disturbing the economy. It's a rent-seeking type. It's never allowed. Just as you read my CV, I was acting as director of research in CBN. This has never happened. This is not.
Isn't that a type of subsidy when you have that other exchange to ensure that you try and rein in those forces so that it doesn't spiral out of control for the average man out there?
You're saying what again?
Isn't that a type of subsidy?
A type of subsidy? You see, as an economist, when you say subsidy, in the economy, it doesn't sink well in microeconomics. Why? Because if I'm to subsidize your consumption, alternatively, I'm to give you money for what I'm subsidizing, what will you prefer? You prefer the money. Because you're in different curve. The combination of your consumption will be different from what I'm subsidizing. So that is why economies, in macroeconomic principles, will never support subsidy. Economy will support, instead of subsidizing and telling people to go and consume something that is cheap, If they have been given the money, they may use the money for something else, which may benefit them. If you are subsidizing a particular product, but I wanted to consume something else, you are forcing me to consume something I would not have liked to consume.
Yeah, but some people will say...
I'm coming, madam.
Okay.
So that's the area in which subsidy at times will not be something interesting in economics. So, because when people have the choice of deciding their own different curve, a combination of consumption, this plus this is what I would like to consume. But you are saying this and this is what you must consume to be able to enjoy a preferential price. And that's the issue.
Yeah, but I think we're looking more at subsidy for production, because you're talking about manufacturers.
Excellent.
And you know, the fact that they were getting this monies at the official exchange rate,
yeah.
And now it's going to jack up production costs, which eventually will affect the end consumer. How do you think that this is going to affect them, you know, in the long run?
Yes, there are quite a lot of ways in which you can actually assist production, because we need to be able to assist production to be able to make the economy can compete. Quite a lot of numerous ways. The investment climate has to be right. Other things have to be there. But there are certain things which, if you don't leave to the market to determine, will not be okay. The manufacturers, I was listening to the news in which I just heard that as much as how much billion was spent on generating cost of production in terms of power. That one is not. Perhaps if the light is okay and they did not spend that kind of money, they will not be asking that you have to subsidize the naira you are giving, the exchange rate you are giving them. So, but quite a lot of other things which government may have to do is not being done. The transportation costs, making sure that the business environment is quite very nice. They need to take attention. So it's a matter of responsibility, responding to ability, both in the part of the government as well as in the part of the private sector. And that's where the word responsibility comes.
In fact, that also leads us to today, the government and Labour are expected to continue their meeting. Excellent. About these few subsidy matters. Yes. So they've got a list of demands, which we'll take a look at as we progress. But give us your impression of the policies that this government has put in place so far. I know this is early days, but from your understanding of what they're doing, are they doing the right things? Are they doing so many things at the same time? Are they placing the cart before the horse? Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think you are putting me on a very difficult something to say that whether they are doing the right thing or not. Well, let me say this one. I think before President Buhari won the election, he said that when it comes in, subsidy will be off. Now, the next question will be how? Because the how is very important. This is something people have enjoyed over the years. It has become a serious problem. And not only that, what process, particularly what we put in place to be able to make sure that people's life, the standard of living, will not just shrink. Everybody is affected. Everyone, including me sitting here. So I think that in making that kind of decision, before even it comes in, I believe he must have been working on the essential palliative that will come. And that is what the Labour wanted to hear now. Labour is no longer arguing that you continue to subsidize for it. But what they are saying is that what do we do because people are suffering? And if the government say the decision will be, when he comes in, he's going to decide, he should actually let us know what he has in store. So that's coming back to the word I used before, responsibility, responding to ability. The ability for you to be able to say you want to do this, you actually be correspondent to ability to be able to do it appropriate way so that people will not actually be affected negatively.
So what I would like to know is in terms of just begin off Chamberlain's question as to whether or not, you know, government has, because some people would say quite a number of things have happened almost simultaneously. We've removed fuel subsidy, Naira has been floated, leading to a depreciation. Now, government is saying that they have lifted restriction on domiciliary accounts. You can withdraw as much as $10,000. Is this even going to allow, because what we are looking for is for dollars to come into the economy, forex to come into the, so when you say people can remove as much as $10,000, wouldn't we be seeing a flight of capital from our... I mean, these are all considerations. But I think the key question is, do you think that we have we're giving the economy too many pills to swallow at the same time?
Okay. Thank you for saying too many pills. But let me say this, that when you allow money to come in, and then you put in stringent measures that will not allow the money to go out, people will not bring it again if you don't bring more inside. Right? So the policy to allow people to be able to bring money in and take it out, create an environment for money to flow in and out. So it is the net flow now that matters. Right? See, because previously, if you now say, where any money that's going, you can't take it out. People say, that's not an environment where I should take my money to. Right? Now, on the issue of so many policies coming at the same time, Madam, I think that what we need to look at is the process to get them done. It is not how long you are traveling on wrong road that matters, but is that the right direction to travel? Just last week, a professor from Cameroon, we were in a meeting, African Union meeting, on sustainable development for the continent. And he told me during the tea break, he said, Nigeria is making Cameroon to suffer. I said, why? He said, the fuel subsidy, price of fuel has gone up. How do you think I will feel? Should we be subsidizing Cameroon? You see, substantial amount of our fuel go outside the border. Well, that may be our problem again. Who are the people at the border that should check this? That is why I use the word responsibility. People, organizations, MDs that are in charge of doing their work, to allow things to work.
Because now they're blaming the subsidy on that particular scenario, which many people here think, look, how can that actually be a valid reason? Because they say we're subsidizing...
Let me say this one. When we were arguing for the African Continental Free Trade Area, I'm one of those who said that we have to go into it. Even at the time, government said no. I said no. And we have to go around the country to be able to sensitize the country. Myself and Ambassador Osakwe, who was the DG of NOTN. And we got to a particular zone in the country. And a very big officer of the government was saying that our border is porous. And I say, what do you want? What are you doing there? You have to look at this thing. We have to do our jobs.
So subsidy is one. Just
so
a moment.
What I'm saying is that
subsidy is one.
If substantial trailers are leaving the country, for the fuel we are subsidizing in Nigeria, should we be fueling other countries?
Yeah, so that's one. Fuel subsidy removal is one. Floating the Naira is another. At the official window now, we know that Naira is now about 650 thereabout. Yeah. Now, if that is the case, we know that in a short while, the price of petrol is going to go up again. That's what we know. So that's why people are asking. And then we also have heard that the price of electricity tariff is going to go up as well. Do you think that we're introducing too many pills at the same time?
That's back to the question. That is what I'm saying, that the government that is doing this one must make sure that he has enough palliative to be able to support it. Because you know the implication of all this, a lot of policies that we actually jack up price. All right? So, therefore, segment this into medium and long time to make sure even before the get to the point in which the economy is stabilized.
All right, we'll take a look at those palliatives much later, but probably when we go to Lagos, Ayo has got another guest right there. Ayo.
Oji Udemezue is here with me. He is a financial and economic analyst here in Lagos. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
It would seem like, from the conversation we've had so far, everything revolves around the energy sector. Electricity, CNG conversation, subsidy removal, and all of that. So I'm going to ask you my first question. Are we doing too much at the same time, particularly within the energy sector?
Yes, I think there's no politics around it. The president is trying to show that he actually is pro-reform, all right? And that is quite positive for the economy, and that is going to also make the international community believe that Nigeria is actually now willing to reform. And I think even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is also now almost like applauding Nigeria for taking these steps. But the truth is that so much is being done at the same time. They are not properly being timed. The peel of subsidy removal hasn't actually gone in, while the other ones are being rolled out. So I think the answer is yes. We're taking too much at the same time, and all the suffering, the untold hardship is quite telling on Nigerians. There's no doubt about that. People are crying every single day. Even on a personal note, I'm sure you receive more requests now from the village, from family and so on, for support. People are dying, people are crying, people are getting depressed. So in any case, all these activities going on are the things that we have all said Nigeria must do to come out from where we are right now. They must be done. But in economic policy, you must also be sure things are properly timed so you don't get people left much, much worse off than you meet them. Yes, you can always say that in the medium to long term, we'll all be fine. But what if people have died before that time? So for me, subsidy removal is a good step, but it was forced by, for me, a careless speech made by the president. Sorry to say that, but that speech was not called for on that inauguration day. Subsidy is gone. It was a bit careless, without having a cabinet, advisors, a minister to sit down, and even though we know it was going to go even a month away from then, but must you also have gone by that month? Because what I keep saying is that the Nigerian leaders always push all the responsibility to suffer, to adjust, to understand to Nigerians, and they do little or nothing to cut down the waste, excesses, and the largesse that we find our government people enjoying in this country. So there's no adjustment by those in government, but they want the masses to keep adjusting. And that's why we've said, why wouldn't you have done something to show that we can trust you, that the savings from the removal of the subsidy, will be used justiciably for the nation?
Just a second on that same issue. I'm a little confused because, going by what you just said now, when the president said subsidy is gone, it wasn't the first thing he said. He said, look, the law has already made some things clear. The appropriation law already says there is no provision for subsidy.
After June.
What that means is that there is no subsidy any longer. That is a conclusion. It's like saying this plus this equals subsidy is gone. That's so when you say it was a careless statement, I'm wondering where that is
on that particular day, because we're not yet in the government utterances can change the dynamics of things.
Subsidy had been removed before the president came into office. Mr. Fashola said the same thing before he left cabinet, that subsidy had been removed. There is no subsidy any longer. I wonder why that didn't
Beginning
go viral.
from when, sir? It was going to start from second half of the year. 1 month means a lot in policy making in government.
Okay.
The government had just taken over, and the way to welcome welcome themselves to government is to say subsidy is gone. If you remember, that same night, and then it wasn't in the morning, prices began to go out of the roof. It's just that Nigeria is actually a very peaceful country. People love their lives. People don't want to protest. People accept anything thrown at us. I was in Kenya in March, throughout March, for a capacity building exercise. All right? And I remember throughout that March, my program, the training program I went for, was disrupted a number of times because the opposition party, I think Odinga, was constantly on the street on what they called a mass protest. What were Kenyans protesting about? That cost of living was very high,
so
prices had gone up,
the issue you are raising is that of communicating the ideal.
That's the point I'm making.
Not that it was out of place.
To remove subsidy is something we've always talked about. It needed to be done.
Okay.
But in doing it, government must be sensitive. Policy making is not just mathematics. You add things up. There must be sensitivity in how the nation will take whatever policy you're coming up with, and how it will particularly affect the life of people who are already damaged by high prices, food prices and everything, caused by global food crisis and so on. And you've done that carelessly on us.
All of that
was insensitive.
I would like you to refrain from the use of the word careless, because it was something that there was a process that was on. You said it is something that needs to be done.
Okay, why
there is never a good time to take out subsidy. We have tried it since 2012.
I know. So it's good to force the process. But in forcing the process, what have you done to the people you are leading? In government policy making, we know the right things to do, right? It's good to do them. But do you also care about, are you aware, we don't have data in this country. Do you know that between then and now, people that have died carelessly, people that have lost their jobs carelessly, we have grown thick skins and it doesn't matter to us anymore. Okay. What matters is that we're comfortable in the government house, announcing whatever we want to announce. And,
let's make some progress because as you have said, you said it's good to force decisions, but then no one ever really knows, how this thing will go. So let's make some progress now and talk about some palliatives of sorts. The House of Representatives made some proposals about palliatives, but the concern that I have is that of partnerships. The federal government and the Labour are having a meeting today. I think it was last week, the president met with governors, asking them to find a way to cushion the effect of these, policies, this approach of government on their people, so that things don't get any worse for them than it already is. What kind of partnership, what kind of intervention would you be suggesting to governors now in the 36 states of the Federation to help cushion the effect of this policy that everyone, including yourself and several other economists, agree are good things to happen? Okay, good. I'm going to give a few suggestions. But, like I said earlier, what I said is this decision ought to have happened. These engagements ought to have happened. These partnerships ought to have been created to show that you really care about. That's the point I'm making. For goodness sake, nobody's doubting whether Nigeria needed to remove the subsidy. It was a big scam. It was a big waste. It was a big hemorrhage on our fiscal, position in this country. So, by all means, we needed it removed. But must we do that insensitively? Now, going forward, the immediate, because, talking about palliative, way forward, there are some immediate, short-term, medium to long-term policies that will help us, get this right in this country. Nigeria's a blessed and big country. For now, I think we must bring in some income policy initiatives that will help. Usually, these days, we talk about fiscal policy, monetary policy, in trying to guide the economy towards the path of growth, inclusive growth and development. But now we have to use income policy that normally comes up when you have this kind of crisis. Every state government and the federal government must sit down and find out whatever gains we're getting from the already suddenly removed subsidy, how much can we apply in helping the workers transit to work? Even this is the states now. Yeah, the states now. Okay. Even though I hear some people are trying to come up with a 3-day work week or 4-day work week, but they have to immediately announce some kind of allowance, non-taxable allowance, that may be called, is even easy, transport allowance to workers around the state. The minimum wage is still about 30,000. You and I know that even that alone may not be enough to even take somebody to work and come back if you're doing a distance of about maybe 2 or 3 kilometers to work. So there must be some support in the way people go to work right now. Because the other alternative, which cannot happen on the short-term basis, is for government to roll out a good partnership for federal mass transit or state mass transit, moving to key locations where people transit to work, maybe the state capitals, key local governments and so on. Every state knows what happens in their state, where movements happen more often. Before the subsidy removal, we would have studied all of this and say how many buses, the type we have in Lagos, the BRT buses and so on, if you could deploy it in a number of states, the investment may not be too much if it's well managed with good partnership. It mustn't be public sector driven. It could be a partnership between the federal government or the state government and some private investors to bring in efficiency. We've done it before. This transportation thing, yes, we've done it before, and it was actually a proposal in the ERP of the previous government, if you remember. Okay. It was part of the plan. How come we haven't done it? Exactly. That's the thing I'm talking about, insensitivity of government. Okay. If they were sincere to build trust, this plan would have been put in place before you. If you announce subsidy and people can find alternative ways to go to work without spending far too much, we won't complain too much. All I said, if you remember my opening statement, that government pushes all the burden on the people who are already overburdened. But most of the time, the reason I wanted you to speak about the states is because it would seem like everything is always at the behest of the federal government. We seem to arrogate so much power to the federal government. Because the money is also in the hands of federal government, and the states only go to beg for money every month. The state governments, as the president said, begged to get the job. They applied for the job. They know how tasking it is. They campaigned for the job, as the president said. They danced to get the job. Now the job is there. Now they have to do so. Mandate, yeah. If in the event that, okay, I mean, we are in urban Nigeria, they may not really understand. We may not really understand what the intricacies are there, especially in the light of the, you know, humongous poverty figures that was released last year. What are the, I mean, you've talked about the things, the partnerships that the federal...
Let me give you one suggestion. The state governments and federal government, of course, there are federal workers and state workers. Yeah. Every level of government, even local government workers, there should actually be a kind of conference, you know, called somewhere that states will select people that will go and represent them. Local governments will select people that will represent, where there should be a dialogue between the president and all these guys to agree what can we do. If they need to even begin to make law to adjust the fiscal formula, let them do that. But there must be some, maybe not a salary increase now that will be taxed, but some allowance given for this situation out of the gains of the removal of subsidy. That is step one. Step two for me will include actual palliative, you know, some, well, what you may call gifts, or you know, some kind of palliative that you can give either in cash form or food fund that we did during COVID. But that must not be done using the formula they have always used in the past. It must be done using state partnerships. The states know the community leaders, they know the village people, they know those who are actually poor. Not government using one kind of formula to come up with names that may be filled with, you know, all those you know, conditional, unconditional grants and gifts. You know,
but my sincere apologies for butting in. You know, when you talk about, you know, palliatives, I can't take my mind away from 2020. That is the kind of thing you're talking about. But you know, there are a number of other things that I'd like us to speak about, and you've spaded it, you know, especially in the energy sector. How do we, you know, cascade all of that all across Nigeria? You talked about CNG the other time, which is something that a number of people have also spoken about. We'll step up more on that when we return from this break. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Mr. Jodimizwe is still here with us. Well, we're talking about these palliatives and things like that. You know, and we're talking about the responsibility that states themselves have to have. So fortunate that we're running out of time now, but government is asking for time, asking for patience. And everyone who has spoken about it, including economists such as yourself, are asking that the people should be a little more patient. Labour is having a meeting today with the federal government, all in the bid to say, look, you know what, let's see what government is offering. We have to remove this subsidy. However, it doesn't have to be as painful. What would you be saying to the people? I mean, you've asked that, I mean, government is asking more from the people, but government needs to shed some weight. Speak both ways. Okay. What appeal to the people, and then what must government shed now?
Okay, for the people, I don't even know what to tell them, but we should not give up. We shouldn't get depressed. We shouldn't give up. You know, this kind of difficult situation actually brings out the best in us. We must grind harder, work harder, and see if we can afford to make ends meet. It's already very painful. People are hurting. People are dying of hunger. People are begging. People are doing a lot to survive. Crime is going up. People should not go to crime. That cannot solve this problem. People are looking for several ways, you know, to make money, even unethically. So people should just not lose it at this point. They should keep trying. You know, maybe help is on the way. I can see some good signs coming, actually. That over time, like my colleague in Abuja has said, some policies take time before they, like the FX thing, it will take time before they close up. So people should just, you know, persevere further. Nobody wins a race by dropping out. Okay, the only way to survive is to keep tough. Most times, things, the night, you know, it gets darker before the day breaks. So people shouldn't give up. On the part of people, we should continue to persevere. On the side of government, I plead with them. Because, you know, for me, it's an issue of trust. The economy or economics of trust. There has been a damage or, you know, lack of trust over the years. Government will tell you, be patient, I'll do this. It's never done. Government will tell you, we're going to adjust. Nobody has adjusted over the decades. Nigerians are the ones adjusting and adjusting. So I plead with government to do something about the allowance we've announced, we've mentioned, concede something to the NLC. I'm actually quite impressed that Nigerian Labour Congress has not gone crazy to announce the usual strike and then we go crazy. I'm happy that they are dialoguing, but government should not be so hard on them in that dialogue. Okay. Government should look in and see how can we adjust our fiscal spending to enable us squeeze out something to help the people by way of palliative, allowance, and even politicians and big men like some of us to be a bit kinder to our family and community and so on. And government should, lastly, government should please look into the current pricing template for this petroleum. It's been subsidized. I mean, subsidy has been removed. Are we also sure there are no rigidities in the market? Some strong forces are still not trying to make some gains by announcing 488 to 550. Yeah. I wish it was being transparently priced at this moment. I leave that for us to look at.
Sounds like you're giving the NMDPRA their own jobs as well. Oju Demezue, financial and economic analyst, thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Chairman, how do you close with Prof?
Well, Prof, some of these TUC's demands are here. I know you did say that they were asking for some palliatives that will cushion the effect. Yeah. And then, yes, they also have long-term and medium-term and some that should be implemented immediately.
Yes.
And I see some of them. You could also reference the ones you've got. Part of which here says that they are asking that government provide subsidy directly for food items. They say the $800 million could be a first step. And then on the medium-term level, deployment of compressed natural gas across the country in line with the earlier promise made by government. The framework and timeline will be developed and agreed by both parties. What kind of impacts do you think this kind of demands will make anyways?
Well, even before the government come to power, this new government, people are not finding things easy. So there's need to actually ask for so much. Palliatives have been recommended. Other things have been recommended. But please, it is implementation of some of these palliatives that worries people. But before you know it, some of the palliatives will find themselves in warehouses belonging to somebody and the goods will go there, just as we witnessed during COVID-19. So how effective will some of these palliatives? Because, yes, Labour can demand for it now. Excellent. But the implementation of it. So what I'm recommending, very important, is that there must be a serious handshake with the government agencies, ministry, department, and agencies of the government. They must be able to know that we are now on a new era. Nigeria is designed by God to be very, very great. Despite the problem we are having, we are still the biggest country in Africa. 4 months ago, I was in Egypt, and Egyptians want to trade with Nigeria. Why? Because they said Egypt is the third biggest economy in Africa. Nigeria is the first. If the first and the third actually combined together, we have dominated Africa. But right at home now, we have policy overlap, policy crisis, policy this and that. If we can actually allow the policy implementer, the MDA, to be able to do their jobs as well, so that the border is well monitored, each of the agencies of government do their own part, then these policies, which is expected, as the president said, we give her to the land of promise. I think we are going to get there. But if the implementation is equally faulty, the life of people will continue to actually not be what we wanted. And that is it. Implementation has always been the problem of Nigeria. But clearly speaking, I think the policy of subsidy and other things, they target a very good direction, and that is why the last speaker said that the World Bank, IMF, and other international governance institutions equally support Nigeria. In fact, somebody said that Nigeria may be an emerging very big nation in the world as a result of some of these policy changes.
So right now, from where we are, from the trajectory that we've taken, I mean, you said that it doesn't matter if the road is very bumpy. What matters is, are you on the right road? The question now is, what should we do next? What do you think is next along this very bumpy road that we're currently witnessing or experiencing?
Excellent. One of the things, listen to what Labour is bringing, because they represent people that feel the impact of the pinch. They feel it, and therefore listen to them. But just as I said earlier, since government know that when they come to power, they are going to do this, what have they packaged to be able to? So they just open the book. inside what they are packaged. When they say they are not going to allow subsidies to go, and then let us know and compare that one with what the Labour is saying. And then that's it. But at the same time, I repeat it, some of these good things which the present government wanted, I mean, the way they said it, it can only be done effectively if the implementing agencies, ministries, departments and agencies of the government, they are not working like before. When you look at it, you discover quite a lot of the problem we are having is because of the lapses in some of these agencies.
All right. All right, Jonathan Raimo is a professor of international economic relations, is a former acting vice-chancellor, Governor University, and also former acting assistant director of research for the CBN. Thank you for coming on this morning, sir.
Yeah.
Well, we will return and take a look at, some political dimension to some of these proposals and policies in just a moment. Do stay on with us.
Federal government, the TUC, and the NLC to review World Bank Finance Cash Transfer Scheme and propose inclusion of low-income earners in the program. As you are aware, the $800 million loan did not really capture the low-income government workers. So basically, we'll be talking about how to include them in that scheme. 3, the federal government, the TUC, and the NLC to revive the CNG conversion program earlier agreed with labor centers in 2021 and work out detailed implementation and timing. The labor centers and the federal government to review and establish the framework for completion of the rehabilitation of the nation's refineries. 6, the federal government is to provide a framework for the maintenance of roads and expansion of rail networks across the country. So consequently, ladies and gentlemen, the parties agreed as follows. 1, the NLC is to suspend the notice of strike forthwith to enable further consultations. 2, the TUC and the NLC to continue the ongoing engagements with the federal government and secure closure on the resolutions above. And finally, the labor centers and the federal government to meet on June 19th, 2023 to agree on an implementation framework.
All right, welcome back. Well, those two gentlemen, I mean, one is here with us, but Honorable Dennis Agbo should be able to join up sooner rather than later, we expect. Well, here in the studios, we've got Honorable Uzoma Nkema-Bonta, who was a member of the 9th Assembly. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, viewers.
Well, today, essentially, as we heard the Chief of Staff to the President, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, say that they will be meeting today to work out implementation. So that is there. So he listed some of those demands. But before we just delve into that, could you just give us your impression about, because we started off with this narrative that was made by Senator Adamu Bokochoa on the floor of the Senate and how he's come back and said, well, the Senate president didn't allow him finish, and so many are taking his statement out of context. And then that led to questions about legislative immunity. What does it mean? What could happen? So when you heard that narrative, what were your impressions?
Oh, well, it is most unfair and not just for a legislator to begin to talk about judicial procedures or he influenced or did not or otherwise. It shouldn't be a discussion, in fact. That's absolutely wrong. All the same, he needs to explain to Nigerians what he meant and complete his statement. But judicial process shouldn't be influenced It shouldn't be sold, shouldn't be discussed. In fact, he ought not to discuss even that with his spouse and whatever. It's very, very wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
In other words, is it excusable? He's recanting.
Until we know the details of what he meant, but from the prima facie evidence, like lawyer will say, he should not have discussed that at all.
So we're worrying, what does the legislative immunity component, what does that mean in this regard?
I don't think that is part of legislative assignment. I don't think, will he claim he uttered that, even though at the floor of the House or Senate, he's protected to some extent, but what he was canvassing, was it a legislative assignment duty? If he had gone outside the legislative ambit, why should immunity protect him? If, for example, we are to discuss a legislative issue, a debate, you veer out entirely that is not related to it and begin to say that, I think it's wrong.
So in that regard, that immunity does not apply to him since that was out of context in terms of...
Out of context, I don't think he should get absolute benefit of that immunity. He still will offer explanation, and they have their ethics and privilege committee that should look at it, and it should be subject to the ethics and privilege to determine the effects of the damaging or otherwise of those statements. I mean, people will believe, in fact, already people believe that what he said or what he tried to say, even though he didn't conclude, according to him, that it goes a long way. You know what, husband and wife, and then the wife decides, and you come to tell public, oh, you made your wife do so things. I want to believe so. Those who are calling that the wife should be sanctioned, no, we've not heard from her. Maybe he was being exuberantly talking out of point or so, or trying to show that the wife had a capacity or to occupy or do that. But it's absolutely wrong in totality. It shouldn't be a discussion at all.
Exuberance at 33?
83.
Sorry, 83. Exuberance at 83?
You can have not only youthful exuberance, you can have elderly exuberance or what.
Okay, all right.
I never heard that before.
Yeah. All right.
Or legislative exuberance, or whichever one he wants to put it. But it's absolutely wrong.
Oh,
okay,
dear.
but back to this subsidy matter. Well, since the Chief of Staff, I just give a reference, former Speaker, at least, well, he did say they'll be meeting today to continue that deliberations. And then, I mean, our guests have spoken about, yes, it's one thing to have all of these agreements, as fine as they may appear on paper, but the system, he talked about, the last guest, implementation, may not be as exuberant as we expect. You have been in the House, you know about oversight functions, you've seen those agencies and how they function. Should we be optimistic or cautious or what about how they will proceed from here?
Yes, I think our problem, like you said now, is implementation and carrying out to a desired result. I also want to thank the president now for having the political will to take away the subsidy. And I also think if he allows that political will to trickle down the House, if they have the political will, they'll do the needful in terms of their oversight and allowing the agencies to do their functions. But if tall orders will begin to come, then it will be the same problem. We'll be running around the circle. We've had in the past programs designed to cushion the effect of certain hardship, but they failed. They failed because of implementation. I'll give you an example. Trillions of money went on feeding the school, money trade, money that, and so on. They ended up not being properly done. And when the House dealt into some of those things, tall orders will come say, stop this, stop there. I agree with Baja Nila that if proper supervision, if the House agrees, if they have the will, they'll get that. The present speaker is a very intelligent young man. I want to believe that if he can possess the political will, then to do the needful, then we'll get there.
That's a very damning revelation you've just made in terms of people trying to encroach on the independence of the legislature, you know, asking them to stop investigation on certain things, such as school feeding program. In fact, when you started this talk of palliative, I thought you were referring to Shopee and all that, because that was directly related to an initial attempt of government to remove subsidy. But if you're talking about the social investment programs and the fact that, you know, you were not, as members of the 9th Assembly, were prevented from, you know, seeing the effectiveness of these schemes by people who were not members of parliament, then there are big questions as to the independence of the legislature.
Thank you very much. You're not new in Nigeria. You've been used to this discourse. We're talking about palliative that will cushion the effect of subsidy removal, ranging from Shopee and social investment. These are palliatives that will be able to do that. The Ninth Assembly did a lot of investigation to expose a lot of things. And I mean, there's also political interference every time anywhere by a party. So you must also sympathize those on those presiding seats. It's not easy. Today, we have been hearing that social amount had gone to school feeding. And they are staggering. Until issues came now with CBN and all what, we are hearing those revelations. So I'm saying that palliatives, in whatever name you call it, to cushion the effect of subsidy should be encouraged, should be supervised properly, should be well made in a manner that the desired impact as tailored will come. There's no point sewing clothes that won't fit us in. So we need to measure it to fit us in. That's what I'm just saying. So Shopee, how far did it work? So when they're saying now they're going to collaborate with the state governments, I agree. Because the state part must be supervised and agreed and function in line with the thinking of the federal government. The House will have a big role to do in terms of their oversight functions, in terms of enabling legislation that will guide that. So Mr. President will also be quick and needful to assent to laws when sent to him. The House should also be ready, having the political will to do the needful. Some people are blaming Mr. President that he was too hasty, too quick to do the removal. No, I agree. If he had started unnecessary consultation, he would have lost the political will. He would have lost the political will. So he took the right step in the right direction.
For that subsidy, right?
For that subsidy, yes.
But what about the other policies as well?
That's what I'm saying now. In the other policies now, he must consult. He must put it down. Having done that, it's like doing a surgery on appendicitis. You don't have to do so because then you apply the anesthesia and you cut the thing.
But if you're going to consult, wouldn't you be losing time while the effect of subsidy linger?
There are immediate and long-term effects or to cushion up. There must be immediate things to be done to reduce the hardship, while there's also long-term palliatives that can come. For example, we need to add palliative in the transport sector. That should be an immediate whatever. RFI tried it, it worked. 2, there must be a way to change or to add to the status of workers. Now we're still at 30,000 minimum pay. Somebody who lives in Yanya, for example, coming to work in Abuja, 30,000 will not be enough for a week.
Now, when you speak about that transport sector, do we really have transport sector? So even if you add whatever subsidy you want to add, what kind of impact will it have?
We'll have transport sector that's inefficient, ineffective, that is not working. I'll give you an example. Transport system only works in Lagos. Even at that, it's not perfect. They have the Lagos buses all over. RFI tried, where are those RFI buses and RFI taxis? If you have, for example, now 10 buses taken off from Gwagwalada into Abuja and another 10 buses taken off from Abuja to Gwagwalada, it will reduce the transport system. How come in UK and US people park their vehicle to enter the train, to enter buses to go to work? Because fuel is the real cost of it. It's not subsidized. So people don't waste it. People don't waste it. So we can have that transport system. Okay, for example, we are now saving how many trillions of naira from subsidy? Can the federal government not make available money for every state to pick those long buses? For example, 100 of such buses per state? The money is there. And then apply the rules. That's why the governors will be involved in the coming together, cooperation. For example, it works. You'll be in immediate term, and then workers will now have a subsidized or a permanent way of movement. They don't need to buy fuel anymore. It's biting everybody. But something must be done. Government can do a thing to see that food are evacuated from rural areas outside into urban areas at a minimal cost. So the transport sector must have something to be done.
Well, you seem a bit bullish about some of the reforms, you can decide what you want to call it, that have been introduced so far. The removal of subsidy, you think it's a step in the right direction. What about the floating of the naira? Our earlier guest made a difference, let's say differentiated between depreciation and devaluation. He says what has happened is a depreciation as a result of the floating of the naira not a devaluation, that devaluation will be a policy statement on the part of government. So for you, and the fact that this is going to have an effect on things that are imported into our country, knowing that we're still largely import dependent, are you still optimistic about the general outlook about how this is going to pan out on the short term to long run?
Whatever name they want to call it, devaluation or depreciation, Naira lost value. That is, Naira lost value. And what do we do to increase the value of Naira? One, we must reduce import and increase export. We must be able to decide what do we want. We must have an open market system where demand and supply will determine. For example, why will you tell somebody not to export food because you think we have food? No, we have sufficient food, but it's the management. So the man who produces yam, for example, may want to end dollar. So you do policies like to say, if you want to export yam, produce 100 tubers. For every 100 tubers, will allow you to export 20. That will increase the export. The man who farms yam want to end dollar through export. So what happens now? Our yam and soy being smuggled to Ghana, then Ghana will take it to Europe and sell because we have policies that are not working. Because we have customs that are not doing what they ought to do. You see? So the only way to increase the value of Naira is to increase production.
Have you heard this? You've heard these things in Nigeria, that people are smuggling yams to Ghana and then exporting it from Ghana.
It's not a hidden thing. Our food, because we cannot have it directly to Europe, they'll tell you they don't meet the standard, the texture, and the bottlenecks created by customs. They will take it to Ghana. They will take it to Ivory Coast. They take somewhere from there, they will smuggle to Europe. Our bitter cola is being sold in Ivory Coast. It's big money. From there, it finds its way in Europe because of the ease of doing business here. These are the things we must improve. These are part of the palliatives we'll also create. Ease of doing business. So that people can, you see, double taxation and difficulties, bottlenecks created administratively is giving us headache. So Mr. President should remove to barest minimum part of these things.
A number of things that people remember about the Oransanye report was that it advocated the merging of agencies, because people have talked about how government also needs to cut down on cost of government. And people talked about, you know, why is it that it's been so difficult to implement, to merge agencies? Initially, in the first term of President Buhari, we saw an attempt to do so. But by 2019, when he returned, it was seen that they went back into proliferating these agencies. From your experience, oversighting some of these government agencies, and I'm sure that you must have seen quite a few whose duties overlap, why has it been so difficult to merge agencies of government?
Again, I will put that to the political will. And I pray Mr. President now should be able to have that political will. You see, a lot of duplications that leads to wastage. If you look at it, Buhari told us or had a body language he was going to do it. As soon as he assumed office, of course, plus ill health and the kitchen cabinet and the need to service the boys, they couldn't do it. They even created more. They created more. You know, and also the legislature should also do the needful and recommend and carry it out. But you also see in the House, other committees are also created to look at these agencies. Those agencies are wastage. There are duplications. At times when they come for oversight, you begin to wonder, you call a MDA to appear before you in 3 different committees, at times in one single day. They have meetings here by this committee. So those duplications we must merge that. We must merge a lot of agencies and close down some agencies entirely. Some of these agencies ought to be a table in some ministries, ought to be a section in some ministries, ought to be a department in some ministries. So why giving them autonomy of an agency with a DG, with the hood salaries, and so on? It shouldn't be so. It's just like I had argued in police. You have this road warden, this traffic, they're all police.
Some of them illegal on the road anyways, according to judgments from 2014 from the courts.
So if efficiency is there, then they need to man their departments.
All right, Ayo has got some questions for you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Well, Honorable, I'm going to ask you Marco's question, perhaps a little more expanded. So that Oransanye report is something almost every government has been told to consider. On the one hand, as a way of cutting the cost of governance. Another leg to that, so I want to ask you how you think that could be done, not just about the political will, but perhaps is there any legislative intervention you think could have been considered? In the same vein, a good number of people, such as Chief Afe Babalola, have also recommended that, look, why do we have to have resident lawmakers? Why don't we have those, that will just come, do their jobs, and they get sitting allowance and they go? Some also have suggested that, look, why don't we have just one house as opposed to two chambers of the National Assembly? Why not have just one chamber of the National Assembly as a way of cutting costs? How do you see any of these things seeing the light of day?
Yes. Let me start from that of legislature. It depends on the system we practice. If you say it's presidential, then we must have two chambers. But if we're going to the other way around, so it will be one. So we must define what we want to be done. We must define what system do we want. Two, I agree that the report laid down things ought to be. The only way it can be achieved is that the government now should subject that paper to discussion, should send it to the parliament to form their own opinion and get us a legislation or resolution from. So parliament may not be able to discuss that if it's not before them. So there must be executive submission on that point, asking for authorization or whatever you call it for them to carry that out. But it should be until that report is carried out, there'll be wastage in government. That leakage, that unnecessary wastage and expenditure will continue to pile. So they looked at it properly. If they don't like the name of who did that or that committee, I won't subscribe. They can set up an panel to still review, to bring it to reality of time. If you look at when that report was done and now, you'll agree with me that there's been a lot of changes and so on, but the main issue remains there. So we must dust it up, bring it up, and see how we can implement it. It's doable. I bring that again to the political will to do that. Why do you think they refuse to look at it, various government? It's because it will have sent a lot of people packing, it will have sent a lot of people losing jobs, and so on. So the resistance was great. They were not looking at the benefit. They were looking at self-benefit from
Honorable,
that.
when you say the natural question a number of people will ask was, look, you were also in the 9th House of Representatives, and you're saying that, it's something that has to come from outside of the National Assembly. What is wrong with the National Assembly itself, maybe a committee in the House of Representatives, coming up with the bill and saying, guys, we need to cut the cost of governance. So we need to review this, document and let someone in the House of Representatives, as representatives of the people, champion that cause. Oh, by the way, you haven't answered the question about, as opposed to paying the members of the legislature, the National Assembly, rather than pay them salaries the way we do, give them stipends, sitting allowances, and all of that. If you can quickly take those responses.
Yeah, I would think that would be desirable. If you understand the workings of the parliament as it is now, you will see that making it part-time will be less productive because, one, it's almost a full day-to-day assignment from plenary to committee works. So if you make it part-time, you will see that the members will also be busy most of the time. Most of the time. That is why it is full-time. From Tuesday to Thursdays, you sit at the plenaries, committee work is every time, oversight is outside, in and out, and so on. So it will be difficult. But if that can be achieved, then that will be good. If it will be achieved, it means that that part-time job will allow members attend to other issues and then get stipends as a sitting allowance and all whatnot as we described. But it will leave a lot of things undone. I assure you, any parliamentarian who wants to do thorough work will not do anything less than 8-10 hours a day. Not to do a thorough work. You must do that. You have to read, you have to research, you have to travel, and so on. So that is it. But I still say that the system we run will determine what we will do.
Right, that's given. But quickly respond to the
federal system of government, but it's unique.
That is understood. Quickly respond to that issue about the Osoro report. What's wrong with the National Assembly? Anyone from the Senate or the House of Representatives taking it up?
Fine. Let me tell you at this point that in answer to you, with difference to Reverend to Bajamila, in his legislative agenda, we included that we must trim down government expenditure, that we must trim down the cost of government, that we must match MGAs. In that legislative agenda, which the then Speaker had projected to Nigeria, it was well discussed. But again, we are told that the House resolution is a mere guide. It has no legal effect. So if it comes from them, and then the House will now give it back in, it may be better. So when the House proposed that, closure of one or two things and so on, these people who are involved will lobby the villa, will do a lot of things that they will describe our resolutions as a mere resolutions that conveys nothing. That's what happened. Right. Night Assembly under Jamila tried to shrink governance. Or tried. That I'll give to him. But again, it was described as a mere resolutions that have no effect. The then Attorney General will attorney Nigeria the way he deems fit, not even reference to the law. Okay. How they described us. And none of the media came to the help of the Night Assembly, say, no, resolution should be serious. I made bold to say one time that the then Night Assembly, at the particular time, we had 116 resolutions. The House didn't obey any. The government then didn't obey any.
But they had the power to override it.
Yes. You have a overriding power if it is a bill, if it's a law that you give them, and then if it's rejected, then a certain percentage of votes will override it. And then it has only been tried once during Obasanjo.
And they did not see it through. No, even for the Night Assembly.
They couldn't.
They had opportunity.
We couldn't.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Political will again. Okay. When members are being told, you must do this, if you don't do this, you may not likely return and so on. So people are careful.
Oh, okay, let's find out.
Only the very radical ones will be able to say, no, we'll go all head along.
We don't know how radical Honorable Dennis Agbo is or will be. He is a member of the 10th Assembly. He's just been elected. Good morning. He joins us next, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Do you feel you have some sort of obligation to monitor or keep an eye on the negotiations that will happen today between government and Labour to ensure that those implementation plans of the meeting go well, such that the fuel subsidy, as the people talk about how they feel the pinch, it's to a very large extent addressed?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. Definitely, something very significant and important to the welfare and the well-being of the Nigerian people is going to be addressed. So naturally, the interest of the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, is drawn to it, and we will follow up what the outcome is going to be. One, does it reflect the interest of the Nigerian people? And follow up with the implementation of the decision, the agreement, because we are getting too used in this country to agreements being breached or being observed in breach. Now, this particular issue of palliatives for to cushion the effect of the oil subsidy becomes very, very important. It is very key, very critical. Everybody's agreed that fuel subsidy should be removed. Now, the Nigerian people needs to have a way, a cushion to be able to contain the adverse effect, the rising prices of the fuel subsidy. But may I observe, it has been said that the Nigerian people are not just those who are workers, who are civil servants, so to speak, and those who are on paid jobs. Palliatives should address those critical issues of our living and our cost of living in Nigeria that affect both those who are working class people or people 9 to 5 people on white collar jobs, and also those who are struggling with entrepreneurship and self-help. Indeed, my take is that the more we encourage and create conducive environment for those who want to attempt entrepreneurship and self-help, the more we advance in our economic development. The people on white-collar jobs are but a small percentage of the population. We know that creating jobs, the medium, micro, small enterprises, they are the engine of economic growth. We depend on them for creating jobs. We depend on them for output. We depend on them for production. We should create those enabling environments, and Palliative should address those critical issues that make the environment more conducive for people to engage in entrepreneurship and self-help, and then boost our national economy. For instance, if between the adjustment of salaries and addressing issues of infrastructure affects everybody. Roads, the roads in Nigeria are in the parallel states. Power affects everybody. Everybody uses the Nigerian roads, and everybody should have access to power. Water, for instance. But sincerity of government and their political will should make sure that we don't veer away from things that impact the greater number of the Nigerian people. So naturally, to answer your question, our interest is drawn to what is going on. And we will also have opportunity to offer our own suggestions as to what best serves the Nigerian people as to relieving their pain with the implementation of the removal of oil subsidy. This is my take. Thank you.
Well, also, the CBN did come up, if I could just move a little bit away from the fuel subsidy matter to some of the guidelines the CBN did release recently, where they talked about those who have got domiciliary accounts will be allowed to deal 10,000 naira per day, and not as it was previously. And perhaps some have said, look, this might have been in line with what the president did say on his inaugural speech, wherein he did talk about foreign investors. They'll be allowed to have access to their funds, invest here, and capital will be allowed to flow. What kind of impact do you think this policy will have on the economy?
Okay, my background is banking, and ignorance is like bliss. Having this background in banking, I look at many Nigerian banks as irresponsible. The reason is this: Nigerian banks should know that their role is critical in economic development and economic growth. Responsibility of the Nigerian banks is about identifying the need to support small, medium, and micro enterprises. But they don't do that in Nigeria, unfortunately so. Now, if you check other climes where economic development has been achieved, in China, in India, in Brazil, go and check the percentage of lending that is to this sector of the economy, and check the percentage that is to the corporate sector, that is the upper class. You find that it is skewed against these people because they don't understand microcredit, and they don't even make an attempt to understand it. In banking, I headed the consumer banking sector of UBA. Let me just say, in UBA in Nigeria, for the entire Southeast, I headed the consumer banking sector. Consumer banking sector is the sector that addresses these micro, small, medium, and scale enterprises. We provided lending on slate 2, they call it, without insisting strictly on provision of collateral security. I also headed the Abuja Enterprise Agency. I was the first chief executive of Abuja Enterprise Agency, addressing the need of this particular sector of the Nigerian economy, because they are the engine of growth. There are ways to lend to these people and achieve very high rates of repayment without insisting on collateral security. But the banks are not ready to come close to this enterprise, to these businesses, to understand them, understand their critical success factors, understand the knowledge level of the proprietors of these enterprises. They are not ready to do that. They want to just hang in there at the corporate level and lend to the big names, and that is where the fault exists.
All right, Honorable Agbo.
I agree.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever CBN, to round up, whatever CBN is doing, CBN should encourage Nigerian banks, because they have not done so. Encourage Nigerian banks. I don't want to say force them. I don't want to say moral suasion. I want to say encourage them to lend to this critical sector of the Nigerian economy. Because I believe that whatever we are trying to do in trying to bring in the FDI is about gingering up this sector of the Nigerian economy that is the engine of growth.
Right. We need to anchor at that point, and we imagine that your experience and the House may leverage and call on you to bring forth or help make all of those suggestions possible, as it were, in the 10th Assembly. We do thank you for your perspectives, as well as Honourable Uzoma Abonta, who was a member of the excuse me, of the 9th Assembly. Thank you very much for both of you. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at some messages coming through. Now, this one is coming from Chris Anozie. He's referring or lending credence to what one of our guests did say earlier. He says, I live in Accra and do a bit of business at the ports. Yam, crayfish from Oron, and bitter cola are great exports that come from Lagos in large volumes. The Tema port processes exports within 72 hours, and it set sail within 96 hours. Hence, Nigerians prefer using the Ghana seaport than Apapa or Tinkan.
A very big revelation, considering the fact that once, you know, we're supposed to have exported yams from Nigeria, and before they got to New York, they were rotten. So it's possible that that's precisely why they were rotten. They took too much time at the local ports before they were, you know, successfully exported to New York. And by the time they got there, it was all but rotten. So if Ghana is doing it faster, what better incentive do exporters need? So there needs to be something done about, you know, processing time in our ports. But take a look at this tweet from Professor Inakena Jr. He says, the possible cushion to the fallout from the impact of subsidy is for government to reduce the interest rate on borrowing to single digits to grow the SMEs and informal sector that cut unemployment rates, give grants to intervene in the agricultural sector to increase food production and drive down prices of foodstuff, improve power production to grow the manufacturing sector, create more jobs, the prices of local produced goods that will compete favorably with imported goods. This will stifle dumping of foreign goods and increase the value of the naira. Well, quite a lot to mull on from Professor Nakena's tweet.
Quite a list, no doubt. Well, the rest of our feedback from you is about our chats, and the first of them is from Professor Sakimboyewa, who says, Senator Bokachua's confession on the floor of the Senate is astonishing and a big scandal. Sadly, it confirms what we all know, that there's high level of corruption in our courts and judiciary. It's more sad that this scandal will be brushed under the carpet as usual. Sad, he says.
Okay, but we do also thank AGK as well as Stephen Wambwinsi for your comments on Senator Bokachua. They're both saying they're not going to hold your breath on what will go on. Well, we do thank you all for your messages. Please do keep them coming through. We will see you next time. I'm Chamberlain, so have a very good day today.
Well, next time, hopefully, it should be tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Cheers to a great week ahead. I'm Malcolm Yusuf.
And please do pray for the federal government and the Labour so that they can have some agreements that will favor everyone. Have a wonderful day and a fruitful week. I'm Ayo Makinde.